North Carolina bureaucrats are about to learn a lesson in the importance of property rights. That's the headline of a column posted at carolinajournal.com. And its author is Erin Wilcox, attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation. She joins us now to discuss a case called Zito v. North Carolina Coastal Resources Commission. Erin, first of all, tell us, what is this case all about?
Sure. Well, this case is really, in a nutshell, about whether you get to rebuild your home after it burns down in a fire, and especially if you get to do it if that home is located near the beach. But the facts of the case are, in 2016, Michael and Kathy Zito are a couple. They live in Maryland, but they've owned a home, just a little cottage on Nag's Head for about 10 years now. And it's, they use it as a family home. It's where their kids come in the summers. They all get together. They rent it out for some extra income. But in 2016, after the home survived a hurricane, but then unfortunately there was a power surge after the hurricane, and the house burned down to the ground completely. No one was hurt, but the Zitos definitely wanted to rebuild. They love the house. It's in a great neighborhood. So when they went to the town of Nag's Head to get permission to rebuild exactly in the same footprint as their old house, they weren't trying to do anything crazy. The town refused to offer them the permits because the house was now located within a no-build zone because it was currently too close to the ocean. I'm sure anybody who knows anything about their beach in North Carolina knows that erosion's a problem, and the beach is always moving. And so even though the house was quite a ways from the ocean when it was laid out in the early 80s, now the ocean has obviously moved a little bit closer. But still, far enough from the beach that the Zitos felt comfortable rebuilding. And they've got homes on either side. They're not kind of stranded out there, one of those houses you see that's alone with the ocean lapping right up to it. They've got homes on either side of their street. It's just as close as they are. But so when the town turned them down, the Zitos went to the California Coastal Resources Commission to ask for kind of a common sense exception. They said, look, we know that our house right now is too close, you stay to the ocean. But everybody else's houses are there. We're not trying to expand. We're not trying to do anything different. We just want to rebuild what we had. And the Coastal Resources Commission turned them down too. And so right now the Zitos have this gorgeous lot that they can't do anything with. They can picnic there. They might be able to camp overnight, but the list of the things they cannot do there is pretty long. And yet the state still said that that's not really an unrealistic restriction on their property. So what the Zitos have done is joined with my firm, Pacific Legal Foundation, to challenge this regulation as a taking of their private property in violation of the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
And I understand that one of the rulings that came down from the North Carolina Coastal Resources Commission was the fact that the Zitos couldn't rebuild at all, or basically do anything with this property, was not an undue hardship. That doesn't seem to make any sense.
That. It doesn't. I mean, you literally have taken away all value of this land unless you want to just stand there and enjoy the pretty view. But yet that's not an undue hardship. You've got to be kidding me. So, yeah.
And one of the other pieces of this is that some people might hear what happened to the Zitos and say, well, okay, they can't rebuild again, so the town or the state or someone is going to have to pay them for the fact that they can't use their property, but no one wants to pay them.
No one wants to pay them. And that is the other piece of this. So whenever the government takes your property and for public use, and that could be anything from a hospital or to build a school, or just because they want a beautiful piece of open property next to the beach and they don't want anything built on it, the government has to pay you just compensation for the taking of your property. And sometimes the government will come and they put a fence around your property and posted an armed guard. You would say, they've taken my property, I deserve some compensation. But when they take that property through regulations, like they've done to the Zito, that's the same thing. And the Zitos are still deserving of compensation for their property that's been taken away from them.
Yeah, and so the crux of your argument is not that this is just unfair or wrong, but really is unconstitutional, that the property has been taken away without any kind of just compensation.
It is. It's a violation of one of our most fundamental rights, and that's our right to own property. If the government wants to take that property, it has to compensate you fairly for it. That's what this country was built on, and that is one of the most foundational things we believe in. So, if the county or the city of Nags Head wants to take that property, fine, but they do have to compensate them for it. They can't take the Zito's property and then say, too bad, not an undue hardship, good luck.
You mentioned earlier that the Zitos have been working with your organization, the Pacific Legal Foundation, filed a lawsuit. A big development in that suit taking place earlier today. Tell us where things stand.
Yes, so today was a big, exciting day. The Zitos had previously the lawsuit was filed with the district court, which is kind of the trial level, the first level court in our federal court system. And today that case was heard by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, which is the intermediate appellate court. And what we were talking about today with the court was arguing about the Zitos' right to be in federal court. The state of North Carolina is arguing that the Zitos can't even be in federal court to challenge this claim. And so what's really otherwise really interesting about that is the state's argument is that the Zitos should have stayed in state court. But North Carolina's process for people like Michael and Kathy Zito is not very straightforward. They've got to go to state court, plead their case. If they convince a judge that the government has in fact taken their property, then they still have to file a whole nother lawsuit to ask for compensation for that property. And the state has to agree to participate in that lawsuit. So it's really not a fair or open or reasonable process to expect them to go through in state court, which is why Michael and Kathy want to be in federal court, where they feel like they're going to get the best chance and a best hearing for this taking of their private property. So right now, this morning, we were arguing to the court that they should have that chance in federal court.
And what's the basis of your argument about why this is a case that deserves to be in federal court and shouldn't just stay in the state court system?
It's because your Fifth Amendment right to just compensation when your property is taken is fundamental, and it's self-executing. You don't have to get permission from anyone else to bring that in federal court. And if you were bringing a First Amendment case, if you were bringing any other case to vindicate any of your other fundamental constitutional rights, you could do that in federal court. And so there's no reason why the Fifth Amendment or takings case should be kind of the redheaded stepchild of the constitutional world. Those rights are important too. And people should be able to bring them and have them heard in federal court in front of a federal judge.
This case is obviously important to the Zitos. It's their property. But you make a point in this column that's at carolinajournal.com that other people who have property that's on a beachfront ought to be interested in what happens here too, because they're one big storm, one big fire away from being in the same sort of situation.
Exactly. As I mentioned earlier, the Zitos, their home was not in some isolated, point out on the beach. They're in a busy neighborhood with plenty of homes either side and north of them as well. So, and let's also keep in mind, their house wasn't destroyed by a hurricane. Their house was destroyed by a fire. That can happen to anyone. So it's really something that cities and towns and counties are having to grapple with how they're going to manage their shorelines, as well as respect property rights of property owners. But they have to keep in mind that property rights do matter. And that's something that every single property owner along the coast has to be worried about, I think, and should be watching the outcome of this case to know how to defend themselves and what to expect should that hopefully never happen to their house, but should it happen to their house.
Now, the fire, I understand, happened, was it in 2016? So
it was, yes.
So we're going on 5 years now since the incident. What's your sense of when the next part of this case might be resolved? Is this something we're going to have to wait months and months to learn whether they can even move forward?
It's a horrible cliche, but the whole wheels of justice turn very slowly is not a joke. But it's really positive that we were able to have this oral argument this morning at the Fourth Circuit. Hopefully that will be resolved. But if the Fourth Circuit decides the Zitos should not get their day in court, that's something that Pacific Legal Foundation will likely ask the Supreme Court to review. We think that this as you said, this is a broader issue than Michael and Kathy Zito. This could affect many, many people, not just coastal landowners, but in other contexts of whether you get your day in court or whether the state can keep you out. And so this is an issue that I believe we would take all the way to the Supreme Court and ask the justices to rule on. So unfortunately, it may be a bit of a longer haul, but it would be certainly for a worthy cause. And if we do win, and if the state does not wish to appeal, that would be back to the trial court to then start digging into the meat and the merits of what Michael and Kathy are owed to make them whole for this taking of their property.
The column at carolinajournal.com once again has the headline, North Carolina bureaucrats are about to learn a lesson in the importance of property rights. Its author is Erin Wilcox, attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.